Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome back. Mhm. So, this is, yeah, we continue with this course, this little weekend, this short weekend kind of course retreat, Meditation 101. Um, yeah, let's generate a positive motivation first. Just gather, kind of focus our minds and generate a positive motivation. Mm, Yeah, so get comfortable in your meditation posture. Remember the 7 point meditation posture, right? The legs comfortably arranged, and then the back and torso upright and balanced. And then the shoulders broad and even, open, even. The hands in the lap, the right hand on top of the left, with the tips of the thumbs touching, gently touching. Mm. The chin slightly tucked, right? And then the eyes half closed, and the gaze cast downwards, and your kind of vision unfocused in space. And then the lips and teeth in a natural position with the tip of the tongue touching the gums just behind, or the roof of the mouth just behind your front teeth. And then briefly scan through the body. Um, yeah, if you like, you can begin at the bottom of your body where your body touches the cushion, the seat you're sitting on, and then scan up the crown of your head and then back down. Or you can also just start at the crown of your head, scan down. So be aware of any tension or tightness, discomfort in your body. And as you exhale, imagine letting it go. It just flows out and down into the ground in the form of smoke or black liquid, and then nourishes, becomes one with the earth, nourishes the earth. And as you inhale, imagine drawing in, kind of rejuvenating, light, white, light energy, fills the body, heals any harm done, any, what is it, damaged part of the tissue, part of the body, and makes you feel kind of rejuvenated and light and relaxed. And then gradually gather one's attention to one's breath. Focus on your breath. Check your state of the state of your mind, and kind of clear the mind and prepare to generate a positive motivation for the session. Mm. So here again, maybe one very helpful kind of visualization to do to as a basis for generating a positive motivation. So yeah, I used this morning in the 9 o'clock meditation, but it's good to introduce here as part of this course, Meditation 101. So is to visualize oneself surrounded by all sentient beings and recognize how we're attached to some. We have kind of aversion towards others. And then towards others, we have a neutral kind of affect or neutral attitude. So those we're attached to, we group in the friends, we kind of imagine in the group of friends or family, those we tend to like, and we visualize them on the right and left and behind us, kind of supporting us. And then those we tend to have animosity towards or dislike towards, we kind of label the friend of the class of or the group of antagonists or enemies, and we visualize them seated in front of us, facing towards us, and so at a comfortable distance and slightly lower, especially because yeah, usually we generate the field of refuge in the space above them. But the reason we visualize them in front, facing towards us, is to help us remember to make special effort to practice forgiveness and kindness towards them. And then visualize all the other sentient beings, whether they're human beings or animals or beings of the other realms. Imagine them all in human form, seated all around us on a vast plain and practicing together with us. Mm. Yeah, so we use this visualization as a way of kind of remembering our interconnectedness with others and remembering the sameness between a commonality between ourselves and others, and thereby trying to generate universal concern for all others without bias, with an equal sense of concern for others. So we usually visualize with our friends and family, with our mother of this life. Imagine seated at our immediate left, and then all of our female friends and family to our left and behind us. So if we have a a wife or a spouse, and then so our mother immediately our left, and then our grandmothers and aunts and sisters, other female friends and family to our left and behind us. And then on our right, imagine our father of this life, or our main male caregiver, and uncles and grandfathers. And then if we have a husband or other, yeah, brother, other male friends and family to our right and behind us. Mm. So the main thing here is not to necessarily generate a visual image of each person, although we can try. I mean, it's good to try that too. But is the main thing is to remember, bring each person to mind, or these different people to mind, and feel how we're interconnected, how we're connected with them in this life, and imagine their presence in the space, around us. Of course, they are actually present in the world, on planet Earth with us, and even probably in same country or whatever geographically they're present, but at a great distance. So we tend to forget or not remember them much. So here we imagine them being present, but much closer to us to help us remember them, and remember to yeah, especially with the class of friends, remember how kind they've been to us, all the different ways that they've supported us and contributed to our well-being in this life from the time we were conceived or born until now. And then generating gratitude and a wish to repay their kindness. Mm. And then we can visualize the group of antagonists, enemies in front, as I said before, facing towards us. Even we might not have anyone we call our enemy, a bit outdated, but there are definitely people we tend to dislike or strongly disagree with, or that we're prone to become angry with, and especially to treat in a way that we ourselves wouldn't want to be treated. Because yeah, anyone who we have that kind of relationship with, or we relate to in that way, then visualize in the space in front, a few yards distant, facing towards you. So these people are kind to us in that they show us our own faults. They show us our own propensity to be angry, or to become angry, um, defensive, and to our potential for mistreating and harming others. So it's only in dependence upon those who harm us in some way that or they cause perceived harm to us, that we can see our own lack of patience and our own seeds of anger. So in that way, they're very kind to us. And then remember all the other sentient beings of the human realm, of the animal realm, and other realms. Imagine them all in human form, because it's only in human form that they can practice Dharma, practice meditation, spiritual path. So, yeah, because we want to imagine them practicing together with us. So it's helpful to imagine them all having taken a human rebirth. So this is the third group of strangers, meaning those we relate to in a neutral way, without a special affection or a special aversion, in a neutral way. And so we want to try to increase our sense of connectedness with them and our concern for them. Mm. So finally, we can generate a positive motivation. So whatever motivation we generate, though, it should be genuine, one that we authentically feel, not just kind of repeating words, or generating some attitude that we don't genuinely believe in. So it's quite a personal thing, but I try to give some guidelines. So with this visualization of reflecting or imagining all sentient beings seated around us, remembering how we're interconnected with them. So yeah, here it's a good basis to remember how everything in our life that we have from our body, that comes from our parents, all our ideas, our language that comes from our teachers and others, And then every, enjoyable experience we've had from, just enjoying a sunset or a breath of fresh air up to whatever the most profound, meaningful happiness we've ever experienced all comes about in dependence upon others, countless other sentient beings, both those we know and those we don't know. Mm. And all of those other sentient beings, whether they're friends or antagonists or strangers, are the same as us in that they fundamentally wish to have freedom from harm and suffering and misery, and they wish to have well being and happiness. So we can generate a motivation, thinking, reflecting on the truth of that. Then we can generate the motivation that whatever I do here in this session, may it only contribute to the well being of myself and countless other sentient beings that I'm connected with or not. Um, who are the same as me and wishing to have happiness and be free from suffering and have the same potential for those and have the same right to those. And whatever I do, may it not cause the slightest harm. So may it cause the most possible benefit and not the slightest harm. Mm. Okay. So you can relax your attention there. And yeah, I'll explain a few things, see if you have any questions, and then we'll continue with the meditation we just started on at the end of the session yesterday on looking at an instance of an afflictive emotion like anger or attachment. Mm. Yeah. Well, also maybe just to add, since we're just the beginning of the meditation session now. I mean, well, we were just doing, what we typically do at the beginning of a meditation session, get comfortable in the posture, generate a positive motivation. So just to add here, so if you are like, if you're practicing Buddhism, right? Of course, you can practice meditation. Doesn't have to be part of practicing Buddhism as a religion, or anyway. But you can practice in a secular way or as part of any kind of spiritual religious tradition, as I mentioned already. But maybe here it's good to mention also if you want to practice like as a Buddhist, then you would go for refuge, would be another part of the beginning of a session. So you generate a positive motivation and then would go for refuge in the Buddha Dharma Sangha. So you would bring to mind or visualize, it's visualize called a field of refuge. The visualize Shakyamuni Buddha or your own teacher in the space in front. And then, so a representation of the teacher, the Buddha. And then if you do it more elaborately, you can think that the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha are all symbolized by the Buddha himself. Or you can, if you want to visualize more elaborately, you can visualize like a representation of the Dharma, with the Buddha's teachings, as a text, like on a low table in front of the Buddha. And then visualize the Sangha in the other Buddhist masters and ordained Sangha surrounding the Buddha. And then you would generate the mind of refuge and recite maybe a refuge verse of refuge. Yeah. And then thereby, like the practice becomes a Buddhist practice. Yeah. So, but that's not necessary. But it's, yeah, if you feel like some commitment to the Buddhist path, then of course that would be part of the way to begin a meditation session, or begin a meditation, begin a day, any day in your life. Yeah, and maybe here also, like, so usually His Holiness Dalai Lama, it's kind of something unique. His Holiness Dalai Lama kind of explained. You don't hear other teachers before His Holiness. I never heard, I don't think any other teachers explain like that. But you can divide Buddhism into kind of three parts, right? There's Buddhist philosophy on the one hand, and then which is more like description of how things exist and the kind of reason and rationality, the way of proving things or disproving things, way of establishing the truth and the kind of logical argument, and then especially the philosophical view about how we exist, how other things exist, what's true, what's not true. So there's like Buddhist philosophy, which mainly has to do with the view of dependent arising, right? How all phenomena are interdependently connected. Um, yeah, and thereby are empty of inherent existence. I mean, the kind of most famous Buddhist philosophical position is that there's no self, right? Anatma. And rather everything is empty of existing from its own side. So yeah, so there's Buddhist philosophy, and then there's Buddhist psychology, right? Which is like the Buddhist description of how the mind works. And that's mainly what we're talking about in this course, Meditation 101, is looking at the mind. Yesterday we looked at what's the nature of the mind, the definition of the mind, some characteristics of the mind, and then start talking about afflictive emotions versus positive emotions. Today we'll talk a bit more about positive emotions. But so yeah, all this description of like our psychology, Buddhist psychology, and then the third. So that's the second part: Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist psychology, and then the third part is Buddhist religion, right? So things like visualizing, of the Buddha, and then using mantras, going for refuge, aspects of faith, Buddhist practice that are based on kind of faith and different rituals and visualizations and things. So that's all kind of Buddhist religion, different prayers and so forth. And you can, you don't have to take the whole thing altogether or leave the whole thing altogether, right? You can, for those who are interested in Buddhist philosophy, then they can, study about Buddhist philosophy without using, the religious or the psychological parts. The psychology the same, the religion the same. No. Although if you just practice kind of religious aspects of Buddhism without learning about the psychology or philosophy, it's a bit shallow and empty. It's not very effective. Of course, the most effective way to engage with Buddhist teachings is all three, but but especially His Holiness put so much emphasis on the fact that there are aspects of Buddhist teachings, especially the psychology, but also philosophy a bit, that can benefit many people, irregardless of their religious beliefs. That it would be a great disservice to people to to say, oh, you can't use that aspect of Buddhist teachings unless you become Buddhist, right? That wasn't even, even the Buddha himself, his intention wasn't to necessarily start a new religion or convert people to Buddhism. So it's the same now. And His Holiness made much effort and encourages also us, his followers, to or those of us who are his followers, to offer aspects of Buddhism in a secular context. So that's kind of what Meditation 101, this course, is in that spirit. So it's not meant to convert anyone to Buddhism as a religion, but rather share aspects of it, mainly Buddhist meditation techniques in a secular way. And then maybe goes hand to hand with that also. So we can divide up Buddhism into Buddhist philosophy, psychology, and religion, and then kind of pick and choose what we find useful from any of those aspects of Buddhist teachings. And then what goes hand in hand in that, and was something I didn't mention yesterday, I was kind of remembering this morning to explain, is that another aspect of Buddhism, well, that you can take different aspects of Buddhist practice and use, and that there's no effort to proselytize or convert people to Buddhist religion. And another aspect that kind of is related to that, tied to that, is that, we're free to question anything that we hear explained in a Buddhist teaching. So a course like this also, it's not expected that you believe everything that, I'm explaining. I'm the teacher in this case, or that the Buddha is saying, or that His Holiness is saying, but rather we should question. It's kind of irresponsible not to. And the reason for that is because, the point of, just like the point of meditation, like any spiritual practice, meditation as a part of that, the point of that is to transform our minds in a substantial way, right? And so to really, so there's, especially when in the context of doing meditation, there's a big danger, and I always think about this when I'm doing guided meditation. There's a big danger, because I think some people are not sure how to relate to guided meditation, especially when we're doing things like the meditation we're just doing, where we imagine ourselves surrounded by all sentient beings, and then think how, my friends and family have been supportive to me. Even my enemies are kind to me because they show me my own anger. That's a bit difficult one, right? There's a lot of questions could arise there, and then all sentient beings are the same as me and fundamentally wishing to have happiness and be free from suffering. That's also a big statement, right? There's a lot of room for like question: is that true or not there? And so when we do meditation like that, it's totally not expected that you just accept all of that. No, we should, if those concepts are new to us, then it's something we should kind of check, check if is that true or not. When I was just before this at 9 o'clock, I was leading this meditation on impermanence and death. And I found myself, as I usually do, I noticed, I'm not sure how other people lead meditation so much. I was wondering, how does Don do it when he leads meditation? I'm not sure, because I've heard quite a few people, as a student, I've heard many people lead meditations. But, and I know some people do kind of, even the way, when I was reading like the handouts for this Buddhism 101, Connie Miller composed most of those. And so a lot of teachers, they do say like, oh, you should now think this, which it doesn't appeal to me at all. Cause like, just to like hear someone else say something and then kind of just think that without questioning it is very shallow. No, it's not. And it's not stable. Because if you don't really interrogate that idea and then kind of look at the pros and cons, the strengths and weaknesses of that assertion that's being made. Every statement entails an assertion. There's some statement or some kind of assertion being made about something is like this or not like that. No? And so any assertion that we just accept without questioning it, it's not really very stable. No. Later on, other doubts could arise regarding that, and then we could find ourselves not being sure if we really agree with that or not, if we really believe that or not. So it's better just to question right from the beginning, right? Right from the beginning, like, do I really believe that? Why? Yeah. Why or why not? What are my reasons? And then that helps us, and we have to draw from our own inner resources, our own life experience, our own, understanding that we've gleaned from, our education and our exposure to other ideas and other philosophy or spiritual teachings or advice or conversations we've had with people. So all of the resources we have to bring to bear on a question like, all sentient beings are the same as me and fundamentally wishing to be free from suffering and have happiness, no? And the more we do that, the more deeper our understanding and our kind of way of relating to that idea becomes. So like this morning in the meditation on impermanence and death, I found myself every step of the meditation, when there's an idea, saying like, well, you have to check, is that true or not? That's one way to state it, no? Is like, is this true or not? Why? And then why or why not? How do I relate to that? Do I believe that or not believe that? So when we do guided meditation, like, there's many steps to, many of the meditations, but it's like every step, it's kind of like we're at a fork in the road. Do I believe this? And then go on to the next step. As the person leading the meditation, I can only kind of really lead one way, right? And there's a, the typical Buddhist way to lead. So I go that way. But like every step of the meditation, you're actually kind of at a fork in the road where either you buy into that and you believe that, or you don't. And there's other questions arise. And we have to be open to like taking either fork, right? As a person leading the meditations, I'm going, the one way, assuming usually it's like, okay, you believe in that. But, but actually we have to kind of question at every step of the way. And and that takes time, right? That's why, any spiritual practice, you don't just become like overnight a total, you don't just gain conviction overnight, right? And if you do, that's not stable conviction. It's probably based on blind faith, right? Blind faith is not stable. So, and there's different ways to generate conviction, but the best is not only rationally thinking about things, but also trying to gain some personal experience. There's some things we can't really just fully answer with just reason. We need to use our own kind of more intuitive experience to help us get an idea about how we feel about something or what we believe about something. But the Buddha famously said, so I should share this quote maybe in this course, is that he said in the Kalama Sutra, you should analyze my teachings like a goldsmith analyzes gold, by cutting, rubbing, and burning, not accept them out of respect for me. Right? Yeah, so the Buddha is saying, don't accept what I'm saying out of just because you feel impressed by me, or because I'm famous and have a big reputation, or I'm older than you, or something, or other people hold me in high regard. So then out of some kind of respect you have for me, you just agree with what I'm saying and accept what I'm saying. Like, don't do that. You shouldn't believe what I'm saying just out of respect for me. Rather, everything I'm explaining, everything I'm saying, you should analyze carefully, like a goldsmith analyzes gold. So why that analogy of a goldsmith analyzing gold? Because gold costs a lot. You could really get ripped off if you're a goldsmith and you're buying gold to make jewelry, and you don't check carefully the gold you're buying, and it's not good quality, or it's some fake or something, then you lose a lot of money, right? Because gold is a very valuable thing. So similarly, spiritual teachings is similar. Like, spiritual teachings is not something light. It's not like, buying a comic book or something. And it's, if it's not the real thing, or baseball cards, then, you don't lose much. It's not a big deal, right? Spiritual teachings, you can see, if you accept easily without being skeptical and checking carefully first, and then you get caught up in this whole, especially like a cult. One extreme is you get caught up in like a cult, a whole set of beliefs and a whole community, and maybe even financially invested, or even not that extreme, but just you get caught up in a whole set of like beliefs and then social connections that are around with other people in that spiritual community around those beliefs. And you didn't analyze carefully at first. You just kind of felt good, it looked good, it seemed good, so I just do it. But then, some years later, you find there's other nefarious things going on, or you find actually, like, I'm not sure I really believe that or not. It happens in every tradition, even Buddhism. I've had friends who even became fully ordained monks, and they hadn't really thought carefully about whether past and future lives exist, or whether karma is law of cause and effect is true or not. And then they see, some unfortunate things happening among I don't know, even leaders in the Buddhist tradition, which, it's because we're all human, we make mistakes. Delusions don't go away because you become religious or Buddhist or something. And then they totally just kind of lose faith in the whole thing, and then give it up. Like, that happens. So, but then that's very disturbing, for oneself to it's like kind of being in a very intimate relationship and getting married, and then a few years later getting divorced. Like, it's painful. No, it's a painful thing. So it's much better, like, to check carefully as much as we can first. Of course, that's no guarantee. It's no like 100% insulation from misfortune and pain, but it can help, right, to make it less likely to happen. That we check carefully first along the way, and then Yeah. So that's what the Buddha is saying. So like a goldsmith analyzes gold, because just like gold is something very valuable, and there's a danger that if we don't check carefully, we, we incur a big loss. Then similarly, a spiritual teaching, any spiritual path is something very powerful. It has the potential to very powerfully transform us as a person, for better or for worse. So we should check carefully if it seems legitimate and authentic, and it agrees with our, when we check and see if it's true, if it agrees with what, our kind of reason, our way of reason and thinking about things. Yeah. Then there's more detail. There's more detail, but maybe I won't go into now. We can save it for the next course. Because the Buddha said, just like a goldsmith analyzes gold by cutting, rubbing, and burning. There's separate meanings for each of those: cutting, rubbing, and burning. There are different ways of analyzing the truth, but maybe I'll leave it for now, otherwise we spend all day on that. Yeah. And that relates to what I was saying yesterday. Just this fact of we need to check at each step of the way what we believe and why. What are our reasons for or against? But that relates to when we're doing guided meditation, there's no compulsion, or it's not necessary. You follow every step of the meditation as whoever's guiding the meditation is leading it. You have to also be aware of what other doubts and questions and issues kind of arise for you that you feel like you need to stay with and address, and you're always free to do that, right? And then doing that also is an excellent preparation for knowing better how to guide yourself in meditation, right? So one big part of this course, Meditation 101, is that you feel confident when you go home to meditate on your own, right? To take some kind of instruction. Like we'll give a whole set of handouts. But again, the way to use the handouts is not just to not just to follow every step and feel like I have to believe what it says there every step, but kind of use it as a basis for getting started. And then when certain questions come up in relation to different steps, to spend time meditating on those questions to see how you personally relate to it or not, and develop your own view, right? Your own system of beliefs and your own insights. Yeah. And and helpful with that also is really helpful to also develop your own analogies and your own examples, especially because our culture is so different from any, traditional Buddhist culture that we're drawing from, right? Like Buddhism began in ancient India over 2,500 years ago, and then flourished in ancient India from about, 500 BC until about 1000 AD or CE, right? So for about 1,500 years, Buddhism flourished in ancient India. But of course, the culture of ancient India is radically different from, contemporary Western or American culture. And then from ancient India, that period, Buddhism spread out to Sri Lanka in about 200 BC with the king, Emperor Ashoka. He sent his son and daughter, went to Sri Lanka and converted the king there, Mahindra, to Buddhism. And so, until this day, Sri Lanka is a Buddhist culture. And then from Sri Lanka, I'm not sure exactly in the Theravada countries. I think maybe from Sri Lanka to Burma, and then from Burma to Thailand it spread, or Sri Lanka to Thailand later on. Anyway, Thailand's more recent. Burma's much older Buddhist culture than Thailand. So that's the current day Theravada tradition. And then also in about 200 BC, some very courageous and adventuresome monks or people, I don't know, I think they were monks or maybe just men from China. They came all the way to India. Can you imagine traveling that day and age from China to India? It must have been very difficult and quite perilous journey, I think. But came to ancient India and then began learning Sanskrit and then translating some of the sutras into Chinese language, and then collecting texts and and teachings and carrying back to China. And that went on. There were a few pilgrims like that, famous pilgrims. Actually, I mean, interestingly, some of the best historical records we have about what ancient India and especially Buddhism in ancient India was like were from these Chinese pilgrims. Because somehow in Indian culture, like recording historical events was not like a thing. No, there were like kings, kings and their lineage and the donations they make was like a big thing around the royal court. There were people recording what happened, but just like people recording, like in a monastery. There's no, not much or geographical description or description of ordinary life. There's not many records like that. Some of the best records are actually, well, but this is earlier, it's from the Vinaya. In the Buddhist canon, there's the Vinaya, the Abhidharma, and the Sutra Pitaka, the three Pitakas or three baskets. From in the Vinaya, but that's more from during the Buddha's life, not in the hundreds or the centuries following Buddha's life. Anyway, so Buddhism spread to China, and then Buddhism began spreading to Tibet around roughly like 500 or 600 CE, right? So it was last of those three. Um, and then there was a first wave of Buddhism spreading to ancient to Tibet, and then there was because Tibet had like a shamanistic religion called Bon before Buddhism, right? They had where they would make animal sacrifice and so forth, still as like many Hindus do in like Nepal and parts of India even today. And there was a lot of like black magic and learning how to like manipulate other people. As I've also, I mean, I lived in India for a long time, and there's also a bit of that still goes on in India. Um, yeah, sometimes we get people coming to the Buddhist center saying that they think they've been kind of cursed by a neighbor who they had some dispute with or by someone else, and then asking if there's some Buddhist thing to do to protect them or to reverse the kind of misfortune that was befalling them because of that. Anyway, so yeah, so Tibet had this pre-Buddhist kind of religion, Bon, which still exists now. It's kind of incorporated a lot of things from Buddhism. So after the first wave of Buddhist teachings came, teachers and texts were translated into Tibetan from Sanskrit. Then there was an anti-Buddhist king, a Tibetan king, and he persecuted Buddhism, almost totally wiped out Buddhism in Tibet. And then there was a second. Then after he passed away, and some generations passed, then there was a second wave of Buddhist teachings around 900 or 1000 CE. Began with Lama Atisha, one of the last great Indian Buddhist masters. He came to Tibet and spent the last 13 years of his life teaching in central Tibet. And then, so independence upon that, and it was kind of really a massive revival of Buddhism in Tibet. Independence upon that, not only him, other Indian teachers, and then that time other Tibetan translators went to India and received teachings and translated texts and brought them back to Tibet. So it was this great revival of Buddhism in Tibet around that time. And that's when these three new schools started. So in Tibetan Buddhism, you have what's called the Nyingma, means the old school. Nyingma means old. Nyingma means the old school. So that's mostly like the teachings and style of practice that came from the first dissemination of Buddhism in Tibet. And then about 300 years later, you have the second dissemination of Buddhism in Tibet. And that gave rise to what's the three new schools, of which the oldest is the Shakya, and then the next oldest is the Kagyu, and then the youngest is the Gelug school. So our center here, Ocean of Compassion, is in the lineage of the Gelug school. Means the founders, Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and then their teachers were mostly had studied and practiced in the Gelug school, which was founded by the Lama Tsongkhapa. There's a little gold. Oh, there's a little tiny Tsatsa here, Lama Tsongkhapa. Yeah. And all these pictures on the wall, yeah. Those red with the red border, that's all the life story of Lama Tsongkhapa. Yeah, there's 15 images. Actually, there's a first one, I think, is the Lama Chopa Merit Field, usually. Anyway, one of them is over there, too. I know. Maybe on Lama Tsongkhapa Day, I can explain this. There's a, yeah, each of those images actually has, it has golden writing it's like a caption for each of the images. And there's that text I found and I translated it into English. So it's, yeah, translated. So I'm quite familiar with those. Anyway, so why are we talking about that? Yeah, yeah, well, yeah, but that wasn't the main point. That's all a big tangent. We're on from somewhere, no? Yeah, the history of Buddhism. Yeah, yeah, that was back a little bit before. Yeah, let me try to trace back a bit. Um, oh, I know why. Because I was saying how that, now I mean, we're in a contemporary Western culture, right, practicing Buddhism, right? So um, there's a lot, I mean, uh, well, and we're drawing, our resource for Buddhist teachings is all much older cultures. Indian culture is very ancient culture. It's very different than, our culture. Chinese culture, and then from China spread to Korea, Japan. Is very different culture now. And then in the Theravada countries, Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, Southeast Asian culture, and they're all much older cultures than ours and much different, very different cultures than ours. So, yeah, as contemporary practitioners, as we engage with Buddhism, we have to be kind of uh, also have a bit of skepticism that way. Well, what is actually something the Buddha taught versus what are cultural trappings that come from, like, especially in this our center, Tibetan, like Tibetan is a Tibetan influence versus what is, and not that a Tibetan influence is necessarily bad, but it's like you want to be able to discern like the essence of what really is Buddhist teachings from kind of cultural beliefs and habits and rituals that that are aspects of like Tibetan culture or ancient Indian culture and not actually central to Buddhist practice, right? So that's very helpful. And then here, one other thing, maybe since I'm going on off all kinds of tangents, is yeah, which I was also thinking to mention is, which is important. I mean, when in practicing like Buddhist meditation in a secular context, as we've been doing in this course, is excellent and it's okay. I mean, Buddhism does have a lot of resources to help us um, uh, be more relaxed, beginning with just the posture and scanning the body, learn how to be more relaxed, have less stress, and then watching the breath, generate more mental focus and bring some peace to the mind, reduce discursive thoughts and rumination, which have a big correlation with unhappiness and worry and anxiety. So reduce the causes of anxiety and stress, and increase more peace and focus in the mind, and thereby increase happiness. Also, and then what we were starting to meditate on yesterday at the end, identifying afflictive emotions and destructive patterns of thought and way of seeing things, way of relating things, and learning to apply antidotes and reduce those. And then identifying constructive ways of thinking and healthy emotions, and then putting effort into training in those and increasing those. Yeah, those are all excellent things. No, and that's definitely, I mean, every thing the Buddha did, Shakyamuni Buddha did, every action he did with his body, speech, or mind was for the purpose of relieving sentient beings of suffering and increasing their happiness and well-being. Right. So that's why we always start off with part of that as our motivation, or part of our motivation. But but of course, the Buddha wasn't just concerned with helping us be more peaceful and relaxed and happy in this life, right? That wasn't the only thing. We can use aspects of Buddhist philosophy, or especially Buddhist psychology, for that purpose, and that's fine. And if that's helpful, then the Buddha would be happy, His Holiness Dalai Lama would be happy. Like that's something excellent. But to think that that's all Buddhism is like something we use just to be happier in this life is really a misnomer, right? That's not what Buddhism is really about. Because the Buddha's aim, because the Shakyamuni Buddha, he grew up with the belief, and then in his own experience actually saw that we have past lives, and then we have this life, and after we die, that's not the end. Like when our body and our brain ceases to function, our continuum of conscious experience doesn't end with that we have future lives also. And so, yes, he was concerned with helping people have a better, more happiness and kind of better life in this life, but compared to this life, our future lives are many more in number. There's a lot longer to go in the future. And so the Buddha was also as concerned, or even more concerned, with helping people eliminate causes of suffering and create causes of happiness in future lives as well as this life, right? And so, but fortunately, they go hand in hand. Like if you just try to be a good person in this life, by the way, you create causes for happiness in future lives, even you don't believe in future lives. No, that's what I always think. His Holiness Dalai Lama, he gives when he gives public talks, in a secular setting, public talks, he emphasizes the importance of being a kind human being, have a universal compassion, secular ethics, and so forth. And he'll never talk about past and future lives or, reincarnation or liberation or enlightenment. He just promotes people being more kind-hearted and compassionate and forgiving. But by the way, of course, if people follow that advice, if we do lead a kinder life and more forgiving and more generous, and use our lives to benefit others more, of course, by the way, we're creating causes for a good rebirth and happiness in future lives, and we're going towards liberation from the suffering of samsara and full enlightenment. By the way. So it's not like they're two separate things. You do one or the other. They totally go hand in hand. And conversely, if you're really, convinced, yes, future lives exist. Yes, I could die any day, so I need to practice now. And so I need to do a lot of mantras and do a lot of circumambulation and make a lot of prayers and things. But you're not really becoming a kinder person, then there's something very wrong, right, with that. No? The whole point of Buddhist teachings is that we become more kind-hearted, better people, right? But that happens in every religion. And we can see in our own experience how it's easy to do. You can become you can take your kind of selfish attitude and then just use religion as another self-serving kind of thing, and become sort of fanatical and dogmatic, and think, if you're really practicing Buddhism, you have to believe this. If you believe something else, that's heretical, and you're not welcome here, so just go away, or something. That people, but people get like that, no? Yeah. So, you can see sometimes, for an example, you see that kind of is if there's a, a formal teaching going on, because I myself I've been like this for sure. There's a formal teaching going on, and then, everybody, all the old students there, they know, there's things you do to show respect and be polite, right? In the Buddhist, you don't point your feet at the altar, for example, or you don't come in late, or when after the teacher sits down, you make prostrations and things like that. So it can happen. I've seen, in a center, there's a formal teaching going on, and everybody's trying to be extra polite and kind of proper. And then someone who's never been there before, they come in late, and they kind of, they do some stretches in the back, and then sit and point their feet there at the altar, and then in the middle of some very, sacred kind of part of the thing, they get up and just go to the bathroom, and then whatever. No, they do all the things. And then other people, you see some people, how do people then react in the old students? Some people, they kind of, give a, what do you call that? A hairy eyeball? Something, give a stare and look, and kind of they get irritated, no, by that, no. But there's something wrong with that, right? That shows kind of, that's kind of like we were talking about yesterday, irritation and anger comes from attachment. You get attached to your religion, your beliefs, your way of doing things, what you think is like proper, appropriate, and that. I mean, not that there isn't appropriate things, but you can get attached to that. And then when other people don't do that, what you think they should do, then you get irritated and angry. No. Um, but whereas one thing that really stood out to me in the monastery was I was living, for a long time in a monastery in the Tibetan refugee settlement in India, is like, because oftentimes we'd be in the middle of the prayers, like 1,000 of us sitting in the prayer hall doing prayers, and we're refugees in India, right? So there's a lot of the local Indians, they don't know anything about Buddhism, but they see this very impressive looking prayer hall and they want to come visit, and they don't really know kind of what we're doing or what's kind of normal to do there. So sometimes, they come in and just kind of walk here and there where we would never walk, and take pictures and stuff. But the monks, they never show, never show a sign of being irritated or like disapproval or something. It's like, yeah, whatever they do, it's okay. We're happy they're here. But they're also not like overly, oh, welcome, come do this. I often found that was a bit of a fault on the part of the monks, is they're not more effort to be like a good host and explain to people, oh, you come here. Sometimes they'll just gesture, oh, you go there, but oftentimes just kind of not, they just kind of just don't say anything. But not irritated, no. So if we see ourselves becoming, I mean, that's a sign of dogma, right? If you see yourself becoming irritated that people are not showing respect or showing kind of signs of veneration or something in the way you expect they should, then that's not good, right? So yeah, but this is deriving from the point that although yes, we can practice, and it is, I mean, it's perfectly fine to practice techniques of Buddhist meditation in a secular context. And in order to have, more peace of mind and a better quality of life in this life, to engage with any aspect of Buddhism, there's no, as I was saying, there's no expectation that you believe in past and future lives. Although that is part of the Buddhist worldview, is that we have past and future lives. And that understanding brings a lot of depth to every aspect of Buddhist practice, no? And so, yes, it's fine to practice aspects of Buddhist meditation without that, but that's not really like what the kind of the Buddha was intending. That's not the fullness of Buddhist kind of practice. And there are some Western teachers like Stephen Batchelor or something. There's this thing called like secular Buddhism, secular Buddhist movement, who they make arguments that actually when the Buddha taught the existence of past and future lives, that was just a trapping of ancient Indian society. That's not what he really thought, and that's not really true. And that's not really an essential part of Buddhist teachings. But most Buddhist teachers like deeply disagree, that because there's a lot of evidence for one hand, and then the reasoning to establish past and future lives is quite strong. And because there's so many sutras in which the Buddha spoke in a way that clearly that's something he genuinely believed. It's not just something he was saying because that's what would be acceptable to the people at that time. So yeah, it's important to know that. Yeah, in general. Okay. So, and this all, I mean, this discussion, every aspect of the discussion derived mainly from this idea that we should be skeptical and inquiring, and kind of challenge every kind of assertion that we hear made, and check where does that stand with me? Do I believe that, or do I think that's true, or not, and why or why not? And because that's a very powerful tool. Probably, in one way, it's one of the most powerful tools in meditation. On one hand, one of the most important things in meditation is just generating mental focus, as we practiced a lot yesterday. Learning to focus our attention on one hand on something, and that's the essence of placement meditation. But on the other hand, there's analytical meditation. And in analytical meditation, yes, like I said, it's a broad category with many different varieties of meditation. But one of the most important things to do in analytical meditation is to check, do I believe this or not? Why or why not? Um, and then, yeah. And that's because, and this comes back, that's because why is, it's so important to check what we believe. It's important because it's it's essential to discover what's true, right? Not just what's true in terms of what I believe to be true, but what's true in terms of like an objective reality of the world. Like everything we believe is not necessarily the case, right? There's a lot of things we believe that are not the case. And so in Buddhism, the Buddha, one essential aspect of what the Buddha taught is that we suffer because we believe things that are false, right? That the fundamental cause of our suffering is believing in ourselves to exist in a way that we don't exist, to believe other people exist in a way they don't exist. And you can see this with attachment and anger. Attachment and anger are both forms of false belief. Attachment, I see something as attractive, I exaggerate that and believe that's really a property of that thing. It's a false belief, right? And then that leads me into having unrealistic expectations, and that leads me into being disappointed and suffering, right? And then anger is just the opposite side of that same pattern. I see negative things about something. It's not that nothing has negative aspects. Things do have negative aspects, but anger sees exclusively that at the lack of seeing the whole picture, right? It's just like when someone's angry at us, we can feel how they just see this little negative part of me. Yes, okay, maybe I said something that was inconsiderate and rude, or maybe I did something that was actually, wrong and hurtful, but it was a mistake. No, but then someone gets angry at us and they just latch on to that thing, and then they exaggerate how bad that is, and then they can't see anything good about us. And then they want to take revenge, right? Which we all feel is completely unfair. But when we're angry at another person, we play that role. We do the same thing, right? So it's very helpful when we reflect on anger, attachment, any afflictive emotion, to remember not only how it is for when we give rise to that emotion in our mind stream, but when we're the object of that emotion in someone else's mind stream. And then when we're a third person observer. There's these three different ways of reflecting on disturbing emotions and positive emotions. When we give rise to them in our continuum, when we're the object of those afflictive emotions in other people's continuum, and then we're a third person observer and we see someone becoming angry at someone else or someone being attached to someone else. And then it gives a very full and kind of well-rounded understanding of how that afflictive emotion works. But they're both, getting back to this, they're both fundamental kind of false beliefs, right? So with anger, you see a negative aspect, you exaggerate that, you think that exaggerated negativity we see is not just a projection of my mind, it exists from the side of the person, which is a major false belief, right? And then that excuses us to harm, right? Then we feel defensive or want to harm or push away that person. So both of those, you can see they're kind of false beliefs. And then those two arise from a more fundamental false belief, which is that I'm the most important person in the world. No one else is as important as me, right? And we all kind of secretly think that. For me, it's true. For you, it's not, right? No. Yeah. And that's, in some way, that's related to self-preservation, evolution, it's very instinctual kind of thought. And in a way, it's because the way we experience the world from within our own body and from within our own mind, right? So then naturally, that's what we're most familiar with. That's what we see the most is our own body and the own mind. If I try to go around taking care of someone else's body as I would mine, they wouldn't like that. No, it would be, I'd probably end up in jail or something, right? And then some other people's mind, like we don't know other people's mind in the way we know our mind. So, and also instinctively, it does feel like, yeah, it's more important for me to take care of my body and my mind. And it is, because that's what we're responsible for. But that doesn't mean like our body and mind, which is the basis for us as a person, is more important than anyone else's. They're each equally important, right? This is embedded in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, I think. Definitely the Bill of Rights. All men are created equal. No? So yeah, but we habitually think that, you know, our likes and dislikes, our life is more important than others generally. I mean, of course, there are exceptions, but and you see really exceptional people, they don't think like that. But and then that leads to that's kind of selfish concern gives rise to attachment and anger. And so yeah, so that's another fundamental misbelief, right? The larger point I'm kind of working at here is that it's important. Why is it important to question everything we hear? Because it's important to know the truth, to discover what's true, not just in terms of what's true for me. That's a kind of, I don't know, that what's true for me, this whole thing, well, it's true for me, but that doesn't, it's like, that's not really evidence that it's true. It's true for you. Like, that's just an opinion, right? But Buddhism is really concerned with, even though in Buddhism, there's the assertion that everything is a dependent arising, therefore everything is empty of existing from its own side. That's not the same as nihilism, that nothing exists and nothing is objectively true, right? It's objectively true that 2 + 2 = 4. No matter what your opinion about that is, that's true. It's verifiable. There's many things. I mean, and that's what's one beautiful aspect of contemporary science is scientific method is looking for objective truth, something that, you know, you do an experiment, you have a theory, then you do an experiment to check that theory, then you come up with a body of data, and then you check, does that data support your theory or not? If it supports your theory, then you look for more evidence to check if that theory is true. If it doesn't support your theory, then you change your theory, right? And that method is very similar to the Buddhist method of checking. But in Buddhism, we're not doing like experiments that are repeatable. I mean, we're not doing formal experiments, but we are doing like internal experiments in our own, looking at our own experience and checking assertions that are made. How does that compare with my experience? And then in my own practice, if I do this and there's some benefit, is that replicable for another person, right? And that's what spiritual teachings are. That's why they're passed down from generation to generation over thousands of years, because people have been checking these certain set of practices. If I do that, is that beneficial for me? And if it wasn't beneficial, then it wouldn't, would have died out long ago. So, but there's this larger issue that, Buddha's fundamental teaching is that fundamentally we suffer because of our disconnection with the truth, right? Because we have misbelief about how things exist. So you can see that in attachment and anger. We have this misbelief that, this kind of ego, this afflicted ego, that I'm more important than anyone else. Everyone else's kind of life is somehow secondary to mine, which is not true, right? That's in discord with objective reality. And then that selfishness arises from an exaggerated sense of self in more like the way we exist, which I won't go into now, but that has to do with dependent arising and emptiness. Rather than seeing ourselves as a continually changing, something changing moment by moment and having no essence, and rather being something that's continually changing in relation to other people, in relation to our environment, in relation to our own thoughts and feelings and our own actions, that we habitually feel there's some essence, there's some essential core that's unchanging to what I am, some kind of soul, an essential core that is not changing and just was there from the beginning, is there now, will always be like that. And that's a false, and independent upon that false kind of idea, then we have this exaggerated sense of my importance compared to everyone else. So the main idea, though, is that we need to always check, is this true or not? Because our own happiness in this life and future lives depends upon knowing the truth, right? Being more and more aware of how things really exist in a philosophical way, and also our own psychology, how our psychology works in a real way. So there's a huge correlation in Buddhism between knowing the truth and happiness, being kind of having false beliefs about the truth, and suffering, right? Not knowing the truth and having a false ideas about things leads to suffering. Knowing the truth leads to happiness. And therefore, you see even, a brilliant teacher like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, even will kind of, first of all, like happily engage with science in dialogue with scientists, but even wager that if science proves something, then we have to accept, as Buddhists, we have to accept that, even if it goes against something that the Buddha taught, because the method is accurate. I mean, the method is valid, right? And it's not, but he can say that with confidence because he also has confidence in the Buddhist methodology for finding the truth. They're both based on reason and logic and experimentation, and a belief that actually knowing the truth is what's most beneficial for us. It's not beneficial to hold on to some idea that really goes against the truth. And as an example, His Holiness often gives, because in ancient mythology there was this idea that this picture of the cosmos, where at the center of the universe is a mount called Mount Meru, a huge mountain. And that mountain is surrounded by 4 continents, and then each of those is surrounded by 2 subcontinents. So there's 4 main continents and then 8 subcontinents, and a Mount Meru at the middle. And His Holiness has often said, like, we have to give up that idea. Even though maybe the Buddha explained it like that, if that was really the case, now with modern technology, we have satellites orbiting the Earth. We would be able to see that. We have telescopes that can see all over to other galaxies and so forth. If there was a Mount Meru at the center of the universe, we would have seen that a long time ago. No, so we have to give up that idea. No, and still, I see some of my Tibetan monastic peers. They're not comfortable with that. Because there's really a strong tendency to hold on to, what it says in the classical scriptures. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, it's already past break time, isn't it? Yeah. Let's take a 10-minute break. No. Yeah, so we just have a bit over half an hour left. Maybe, yeah, we want to work towards continuing the meditation that we just started yesterday, looking at, because yesterday afternoon, I spoke about, I described each attachment and how attachment, what it is, how it functions, and anger. And then we were just starting to look at an example of one of those and our experience. And that description was in the context of, so in this course so far, we've learned, some of the basics of meditation, how to sit in the posture, how to do scanning the body, to relax the body, to prepare for meditation, how to focus the mind, a bit how to generate a positive motivation. Then I added a bit to that this morning with visualizing ourselves surrounded by all sentient beings and trying to generate a sense of universal concern for others, for other sentient beings. And then we learned about, a big discussion, was it, I forget, is it yesterday, the day before yesterday? I think it was yesterday morning. What is meditation? Essentially, what are we doing when we meditate? And then 2 different types of meditation, placement meditation or stabilization meditation as a synonym, and then analytical meditation. Another type, which includes many things. And then, and then more about how to set up a meditation session, and then other supportive conditions like the place where we meditate, the kind of cushion that we sit on when meditate, and then how long to meditate, how frequently, and so forth. And then some of the benefits we went over yesterday, I think afternoon also. Some of the benefits of regular meditation practice from in a traditional way. just describing, and then also from recent studies in contemplative psychology and neuroscience, studying the brains and the physiology of long-term meditators, and then also just people who do a short-term meditation, like an 8-week course or something. You can see changes in both, but typically with the longer term, the more long-term you meditate, the more the benefits become traits that you continually experience, whether you're in meditation or not, whether you've been meditating recently or not. They become kind of built-in characteristics of how you experience and engage with the world. Yeah, and then we looked at then came the discussion of, well, how do we actually, in day to day, what do we meditate on? Okay, yes, we can sit and watch our breath, every day, or watch our mind, and that can be very helpful to relax and generate mental focus and generate, many other benefits of meditation. But is that all we do? Is just, do placement meditation essentially? No, we do analytical meditation. In Tibetan tradition, especially in the Gelugpa, analytical meditation is kind of what's being done. And here also, maybe it's good to mention, if you're new to Buddhism, as probably many of you are, then, like I was just explaining, Buddhism is kind of a vast tradition, right? Because it started 2,500 years ago in ancient India. It spread. There's a Theravada tradition as it kind of developed in Sri Lanka, Burma, and Thailand. And then it spread to China and then gave rise to the Chan tradition, which has its own kind of particular emphasis, and then spread to Japan, Korea, and became Zen, and it has its own flavor. And then also spread to Tibet, where it just became totally crazy. Has its own kind of flavor with prayer flags and prayer wheels and all this tantra things, which is actually not Tibetan innovation. I'm kind of joking a bit. I shouldn't joke around about Buddhism, but yeah. But it is. Tibet, yeah, compared to other Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, it can look a little crazy. But it's not that Tibetans didn't make up the whole Tantra thing. They just kind of fully took it on from the Indians and continued it. So it was actually, Tantra arose in ancient India as part of ancient Indian Buddhism. But it was practiced largely in secret. That's kind of one way it changed. In ancient India, it was quite secret. Like even you went and requested a teacher for guru for Tantric teachings. Usually they wouldn't give you for, a few years or maybe never until they check you out. Whereas and it started off like that in Tibet. Those teachings were quite secret, but gradually they became more kind of public and more just kind of widely known, until now it's kind of like, it's like someone new to a center, just give them an initiation and a tantric practice, and it's a bit of a degeneration like that. Things have become very public now, which carries some danger. But why am I talking about that? Yeah. So, but then what actually to do in meditation practice? So I was saying in Tibetan tradition, and within that in the Gelugpa school, there's a lot of analytical meditation. So how do we know what analytical meditation to do? There's basically two ways we can decide. One way is to become familiar with this whole series of important topics of contemplation, right? To think about and to meditate on, that's organized in this very effective kind of set of teachings called the Lam Rim, or the graduated stages of the path to enlightenment. So maybe after lunch today in the afternoon, I'll just show, for those of you who are new to that, I'll show you online, or on the screen here, a couple books. There's a Lam Rim Outlines by Karen Valhern, I think. I'm not sure how to spell her last name, Annie Karen. And then there's How to Meditate by Kathleen McDonald. Those are two excellent kind of resources to start with. And then I'll show you also in the FPMT prayer book, the prayer book we use, a couple of Lam Rim prayers that are very useful in your daily meditation. So one way to decide what to meditate on each day is to go through these topics of, Casey, if you can find those books, that'd be great. Yeah. go through these meditation topics and spend, a week or a few weeks or a month on each. And then also attend more courses. Now, if you're interested, attend more courses, hear more explanations of those. Yeah. But then another way to answer that question, look, what do I meditate on? And maybe a more important way is to look at your own life and see, well, what do I have problems with? In terms of my mind, like what's troubling me? Is it that, I'm very distracted all the time? Or is it that I have a lot of anxiety? Do I have like a low self-esteem? Do I have paranoia? Do I have anger? Do I have jealousy? Like what's the predominant afflictive emotion in your own experience at any point in your life? And then work with that, right? And then so from there, then I went into this description of attachment and anger, because the three root afflictions basically are attachment, anger, and then we can say selfishness, like the self-centered concern. All of the afflictive emotions arise from a kind of a distorted. I mean, there's a healthy type of self-concern with ourselves. We need to take care of ourselves, right? Ourselves, we are important. We're as important as anyone else in the world. And, our own mental health, our own physical health is something important. Like otherwise, why are we doing anything we're doing, right? It is important for us to be happy and to be free from suffering. But, so there's a healthy sense of concern for oneself, but there's also being self-centered, right? A distorted or destructive sense of concern for ourselves, where we think I'm more important than anyone else, right? That's not healthy, right? So yeah. But whatever afflictive emotion we find is troubling us at any point in our life, it's related to one of those three. Anger, it's either related to a form of anger, or it's related to a form of attachment, an unrealistic expectation that goes with attachment, and it's probably has some degree of, almost guaranteed, has some degree of selfishness, right? Being self-centered in an unhealthy way. So that's why I started talking about those. And I mean, I didn't explain much about selfish and self-centered yesterday. Today I said a bit more about it, but I did explain quite anger and attachment. And then we started to meditate on those, but we quickly ran out of time. So what we want to do is meditate more on those. But since I've said so many things yesterday afternoon and today, maybe we should give opportunity for ask you if you have questions or comments before we go on. Well, you don't look like you're about to ask anything right away. Okay.
I have a question.
Oh, yeah.
So where does fear fit into all of this?
Okay. I'll answer her question first, Rashmika.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize somebody in the class.
No, I know. It's no problem.
Thanks.
Yeah, see everything. Yeah, so Rochelle was asking, where does fear fit into all of this? Yes. Fear fits in a lot of different places. Like cobwebs in your house. Not your house in particular, but someone's house. A house, my house, I can say. Yeah, fear. Well, fear, it's important to recognize. Yeah, it's interesting, Well, one thing that's interesting is that how do we define an afflictive emotion, a disturbing emotion? It's one that it's like a thought or feeling, an emotion that when it arises in the mind, it disturbs the peace of our mind, right? Mm-hmm. And typically, we tend to say, well, any disturbing emotion is bad. It's something we want to reduce and get rid of. But is it really the case that every thought or emotion that arises in the mind and disturbs the peace of our mind is bad or something we want to get rid of? Not really, actually. And when you look at fear, you find good examples of something that, when it arises in the mind, disturbs the peace of the mind, but actually is very useful and we need. So fear, you can't say that fear and doubt is also similar, is that it's an afflictive emotion, because it's not always, because anything we call an afflictive emotion or disturbing emotion is typically something that we want to abandon, we want to get rid of. And this is talking in the context of Buddhist psychology and Buddhist philosophy, psychology. And And so, but fear, there's healthy kinds of fear. There's very useful kinds of fear. For example, I mean, I experience every time I come here to the center, I have to drive from Boulder Creek to here, right? On single lane road, very curvy no, not single lane, double lane roads. Yeah. Double lane roads. There's no space for passing. There's only double yellow lines like the whole way. And there's cars coming very fast the other direction. Just this morning, when I was coming this morning, I came over Highway 9 and there's yeah, on one of the curves, I had set my phone down on the passenger seat behind me, and then one of the curves, it flew off over to towards the door, and I wasn't sure where it was. So I wanted to stop and find it in case I couldn't find my way to the center, because I needed it to navigate from Saratoga onwards or something. Although I didn't need it today. I found my way here without Google. But there's also a really nice turnout right at the kind of the peak, the ridge at the crest of the road, where you can see over the whole bay and you can see the ocean and stuff. So I'd passed it many times, but I never stopped. So this morning I stopped there to find my phone and just to have a look at the view. But there was it must be some kind of club of sports car drivers. There was like 20 like Porsches and, all these Acuras, and I didn't see a Lamborghini, but all these little sports cars, with many of them convertible, but all lined up, and all the owners like standing around taking photos of all their must be some kind of club, no? All their like race cars lined up together, and I was like, yeah, those are the guys I can hear from my house, like racing up and down like Highway 9. But what my point is again that as you're driving down a two-lane road on a curvy road, if you didn't have fear of crashing into an oncoming car, that's just foolish, right? And there's a bit of nervousness when you go around a sharp corner and you can't see like who's coming the other direction. You don't know if they're going to be in your lane or not, or if you can stay, or if you're going slow enough to stay in your lane or not, right? If you don't have some kind of fear about crashing to the oncoming car, then you're not safe in a way. You're not being responsible, right? You need to have, but that kind of fear, yeah, it disturbs the mind a little bit, especially the first couple times you drive the road. Like you'll feel a little bit like, ooh, I'm not sure I can do this safely or not, right? But that fear protects you from harm, right? It does cause some disturbance in the mind, but it also protects you from harm, right? So it's a healthy kind of fear. So some kind of fear is constructive, right, and useful. But then other kind of fear is not helpful and is not useful. For example, if and this also happens, maybe I'll stick with this Highway 9 analogy. Like sometimes there's a really fast car comes up behind you and they're tailgating you. And then you have a fear that, oh, if I don't go fast enough, this person's going to get annoyed, right? And then you end up going faster than you're actually comfortable driving because you don't want that person to get annoyed with you, right? But that's a destructive kind of fear because it pushes you into doing something that's not safe, right? It puts you in danger and it puts other people in danger as well for this because of your ego. It's your ego that doesn't want this person to get annoyed at you. Mainly in that situation, I think there's no wisdom really about that. It's just kind of, you don't want this person to think you're kind of a lame, slow driver or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, there's a little bit that comes, no, but there's other situations. I mean, maybe that's a bit of a silly kind of situation, but when we're teenagers, we all feel that peer pressure. That's what peer pressure is. Your peers think you should do something that you feel is not really right, is not right, but yet you have a fear of their disapproval of you, so you just do it anyway. I mean, how many accidents does that lead to, right? Or harm, no? So that's a kind of destructive fear, right? Yeah, I mean, in most cases, that fear of disapproval, no, I don't know, most cases is maybe a bit, but yeah. So there's all different kinds of fear. In short, I think it's not easy to say, oh, well, fear is like this, right?
Yeah, I think I was asking more about the first kind of fear, so that's helpful. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, then I'll stop there. We could have a whole weekend course on fear if we wanted. Yeah. Rashmika?
Geshe, I remember on Friday when I was here, as you were talking about meditation, there was a part where, let me see if I say it correctly. Your meditation helps you with future lives, as you know, as we come into rebirth again. Could you tell us a little more about how does meditation help with future lives?
Sure. Yeah, I was also mentioning today a bit. I mean, I alluded to it today, but yeah, how does meditation help in future lives? Well, there's different ways. I mean, one is, well, in the big way, in a general way, is because our own experience, in short, is a product of our own minds. Like, according to how we use our minds, we create our own experience. We can see that in the present moment, according to how we think about things, we perceive things in a different way. Like if we think about, for example, like in the meditation we started with this morning, where we imagine ourselves surrounded by others, and friends, enemies, and strangers, and try to remember how they've each contributed something positive to our lives. Then we generate gratitude. So if we have that kind of attitude of being grateful for the way others, whether we directly and we know them, or they're strangers and we don't know them, how others contribute something helpful, positive to my life, then we naturally, it changes the way we see people, right? It helps us see people in a more positive light. Whereas if we just watch like like a news all the time that's just about this crime and that crime, and how this company's cheating you and that company's cheating you, and you know how most people are not really trustworthy, and kind of that, we can also generate that kind of view where like you can't really trust anyone. Actually, I heard a statistic just on a podcast or something the other day, that people, I think like the 30 and under, they think that, I think something like 70% of them say most people you can't trust. You know, whereas people over like 50 or 60, they'll say, you know, most people you can trust. There's a minority of people you can't, but most people you can. There seems to be a societal change where we have less trust among each other. So, for example, if you generate this view that most people you can't be trusted, it causes, you know, a lot of fear in your mind. So the way we use our mind, the kind of views we develop, the things we believe, the way, especially the way we view other people, the way we view the inanimate environment around us, it changes the quality of our experience. It can either cause us more happiness or cause us more suffering. So in that way, and that's one way that our own minds, the way we use our attention, we use our minds, we create our own experience. We create happiness or suffering in this life, right? But then that also, in another way, our minds create our experiences, because in dependence upon having, you know, a certain intention to do something, or a certain motivation, like why do we do the things we do? That in dependence upon that, we create karma. Every time we engage in deliberate action of our body, speech, or mind, we act in a deliberate way, then we do so with some kind of reason. We're doing so because I want to achieve this, right? So where we have a non-virtuous motivation, like we have a desire to harm someone, or just do something that's going to be somehow helpful or satisfying to me, without considering how it affects others, even though it might cause harm to others, we don't care, right? Then we create non-virtuous karma. That karma leads to suffering experiences in the future. For example, if we lie to others, cheat, steal from others, then it's causing harm to others, and it creates the cause for us to harm others in the future, right? Whereas if we have a virtuous motivation, whatever we do with the motivation, and that's why we practice this motivation all the time, right? That whatever I'm doing may not cause harm to anyone, and may it be beneficial to myself and to others, right? So whatever we do with a virtuous motivation like that, the wish to benefit, yes, ourselves, but also others, right? Then it becomes a virtuous action, and that becomes a cause for fortunate and happy experiences in future lives, right? So that's another way so when we meditate, then we become more aware of what's going on with our mind, And thereby we become more aware of, well, how am I using my attention in a positive way or destructive way in general? And also, what's my motivation? You know, from moment to moment through the day, like, why am I doing the things I'm doing? We learn to give more meaning to our life, which is a cause of happiness itself. But also we learn to be aware of our motivation and thereby generate a positive motivation. And also how our actions, we become more aware of how our actions, you know, especially our speech, affects others, right? So then we engage in more virtuous actions. So we create more causes for happy rebirth and then fortunate experiences in future lives. And then finally, like, we also are just more aware of the fact that we're going to die, right? So we prepare for death. And we habituate our mind to having positive attitudes like loving kindness and altruistic concern for others. And then the more our minds are like accepting of the fact of death, and also we prepared for it by generating positive attitudes towards others, then our experience of death becomes more smooth and peaceful and, you know, joyous, hopefully. And then if we can die with kind of grace, and wisdom, then it ripens karma to take a good rebirth. And that helps to take a good rebirth and then continue. And we also make prayers, right? Then that continues, that helps us to be able to continue our spiritual practice in future lives. So in all those different ways, in many different ways, meditation prepares us for death and helps us experience death with, in a way that's kind of peaceful and beneficial. Also helps us, also gives us more ability to help others with the process of dying. No? If we're comfortable and familiar with and have some understanding around the whole process of dying, then we can be a great resource to others. No? Because most people don't take much interest in it. They don't think about it much and they don't prepare for it much. No? So, it's very excellent as a Buddhist practitioner to do like hospice work. But even we don't do formally hospice work, just to be familiar with the process of death and be open to talking with people about it is something many people don't have. No? Yeah. Other questions or comments?
I had a question about the different meditation practices in other types of Buddhism, like Theravada and Zen.
Sure. Yeah, it's a bit different. They all share the basic same practices, but the emphasis is different. Even within Buddhism, there's even within Tibetan Buddhism, well, maybe we keep it more general. Within Tibetan Buddhism, there's a lot more emphasis on like doing visualization, use of mantras, and also analytical meditation, other kinds of analytical meditation, and like meditation on compassion is especially strong in Tibetan Buddhism. Whereas in Zen Buddhism, there's a lot more emphasis on kind of meditating on the nature of the mind and on emptiness, different views of emptiness, and also kind of like breaking down our rational concepts, a rational framework. It's quite common, it became quite widespread view in like Chan and Zen Buddhism, and even, well, I guess China, there's also Pure Land Buddhism is another school. But to stick with Zen Buddhism, there's an idea that just following, like using ration and reason and following like your thoughts all the time is a big obstacle, right? You need to, at some point, break through your rational constructs and just experience the nature of your mind and the nature of reality as it is, apart from your projections onto it, right? There's a lot of truth to that, but the method to do that is much more like, well, the use of koans and so forth, and this kind of austere aesthetic as a way of like working towards that. And then another side of Chinese Buddhism is Pure Land Buddhism, where there's emphasis on faith, generating single-pointed faith in like Amitabha Buddha or other Buddhas, and reading sutras that the Buddha spoke where there's these dialogues between bodhisattvas and Buddhas and being inspired by, those profound conversations they had, and thereby generating faith and making prayers to take rebirth in a pure land, right, as like a heaven. So those are two, and that's another kind of meditation, right? That's sort of generating faith. And then in Theravada Buddhism, Theravada, there's a bit of in all the different Buddhist traditions, there's a bit of a dichotomy between like what the monastics, the ordained monastics do and what the lay people do. Some of the lay people do kind of similar practice to the monastics, but especially you see in Theravada, it's a lot the lay people. For lay people, the practice is very strongly like practicing generosity, offering dana, making offerings to the ordained sangha and supporting the ordained sangha is a kind of meditation in itself. But then also, of course, the lay people meditate. And for the ordained sangha, there's a very strong emphasis, which is excellent, on generating single-pointed concentration, generating good mental concentration. And as a basis for that, practicing very pure morality, really refraining from harming sentient beings. So, really practicing pure morality of not stealing, not killing, not lying. I mean, that's common to all the Buddhist, monastics especially, but all Buddhist practitioners. But you see, maybe I should say more to make it a bit more clear, the difference. In Theravada tradition, like especially for the monastics, to keep all of the monastic vows, like very purely. For like among monastics in the Theravada tradition, it's much less common to eat in the evening, right? Which is one of the monastic vows. Whereas in the Tibetan tradition, it's very common for monastics to eat in the evening because there's not so much emphasis on keeping those minor vows, the lesser vows, right? The major vows of not killing, not stealing, not lying, practicing celibacy is common, right? To all. But in the Theravada, there's very strong emphasis on keeping this very pure kind of monastic discipline as a basis for generating very good meditative concentration, and then the Eightfold Noble Path is, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's very strong in that tradition. In the Eightfold Noble Path, I mean, the other two we have it, but it's not so central, right? So yeah, according to sort of more like the historical development of the different schools and how the Buddhism spread to those countries and what aspects of Buddhism became, according to that way they spread, different aspects of Buddhism became more prominent in each of the different schools, and thereby different forms of meditation became more central. Yeah.
Thank you.
In Theravada, they become monks for like 4 or 5 years. And they're like, for instance, our traditions, like you're a monk, you're expected to be a monk forever.
For life, yeah.
Yes. Is that something that they just emphasize, or?
Yeah, I'm not sure how that different. That's true. There is that difference. Yeah, that when like in the Tibetan tradition, the Tibetan, there's different lineages of ordination that come from they all come from Shakyamuni Buddha. But then there became slightly different, as time went on. In the first 300 years after Shakyamuni Buddha passed away, there came to be 18 different sub-schools of the monastic ordination lineages. Now there's only 3 existent, and they largely map onto these like the Theravada is one, and then in the Tibetan it's called the Mula Savasthavarda. It means I think it's the basis of all. I forget how to translate. And then in the Chinese tradition, there's a Dharmagupta, which, I don't remember the English translation of that. But anyway, there's 3 different lineages of ordination. And there's some slight differences in interpretation arose. And one of them is this, that in the Tibetan monastic tradition, it's held that when you take ordination, you have to have the determination to keep the monastic vows for your entire life until death. Otherwise, you won't generate the vows, right? So you have to have that intention at the time of taking ordination. Whereas in the Theravada, I believe that's not there. That's not accepted. That So there is this common practice of, it's like temporary ordination. You take ordination and you can give back after a few months, even a month or a few months or a few years. And there's no not any special negativity associated with that. It's not considered something kind of that you're breaking a promise. Whereas in the Tibetan tradition, it would be considered, well, you promised and then now you're not doing that, right? You're breaking a promise, essentially. In the Chinese tradition, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how it is. I haven't had that conversation with a ordained brother or sister in the Chinese tradition. Yeah, and I'm not sure why that difference arose. But yeah, that is there. Although, I mean, I should say in the Tibetan tradition, of course, many people do, probably even a majority of those who take ordination give back their ordination, or maybe a slight majority. Many give back, and it's okay to give back. I mean, you can give back your ordination. It's not like you can't or something. And it's even not considered especially, especially bad or non-virtuous. It's more like in society, there's a lot of embarrassment attached with it, right? But it's not considered like an inherently bad thing. Generally, the giving back your ordination is something that it's like there's a question. Is that something that's to be abandoned and refrained from, or something to be engaged in, a practice to be engaged in, right? And the advice is generally it's something you try to refrain from. You don't give back. But if you're in a situation where you think you're going to break a root vow, like your root vow is being not kill a human being, not lie about your spiritual attainments, not steal something of value that's significant enough that you could be criminally prosecuted for stealing that, right? In the country you live in, to not, and then the fourth one, to not have sexual intercourse, right? So the most dangerous one is sexual intercourse. That's what most people break if they break one of the 4 root vows. So but it's said that if you find yourself in a situation for whatever in your life that there's a serious danger you're going to break one of the root vows, then it becomes much better to give back the vows before you break, right? So between giving back the vows and breaking them, it's much better to give them back, right? So in that situation, it's something to be practiced, right? But otherwise, it's something to be abandoned. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? We have 60 seconds. Yes.
Kishla, thank you. For the 3 different afflictions, anger, attachment, and
Selfishness.
The antidotes are like for anger, I believe it's compassion and kindness, and then for attachment, it is patience, I believe. Or
No, attachment is like contentment. But we're coming to that.
okay,
That's our next project.
okay, that's in the afternoon.
First, just finish. That's in the afternoon. Yeah,
Okay.
we'll talk about that this afternoon.
Sounds good.
Okay, so that's a good segue. That's why you should come back after lunch, even though you'll be full and sleepy. You have some coffee or tea and then have a rest. Anyway, okay, so we'll have an hour-and-a-half lunch break. The next session starts at 2 o'clock. Yeah, you briefly dedicate on your own. No? Yeah. Okay, thank you all, and see you a bit later.